Welcome to the first episode of our podcast, where we help you develop the skill of thinking in English. If you've ever felt frustrated because you translate everything in your head before speaking, this episode is for you.
That's right. Today, we're going to talk about why thinking in English is so important and how it can transform your fluency. Imagine being able to speak naturally without hesitation. No more slow translations in your mind.
Today, we're diving into a big question. Why is thinking in English so important? Many learners focus on grammar and vocabulary, but if you always translate in your head, it slows you down.
Exactly. When you think directly in English, everything flows more smoothly. But why does this happen? Let's break it down.
The first reason is speed. When you stop translating, you can respond faster in conversations. Have you ever had a moment where someone asked you something, and you needed extra time to translate your answer in your head?
Oh, I see this all the time. It's like your brain has to do extra work. First, understand in your language, then translate to English, then check if it's correct, and then say it. That's too many steps.
Right. But when you think in English, there's no delay. Your response time improves, and you sound more natural.
The second reason is understanding. If you train your brain to think in English, your listening skills will also improve.
That's because you're no longer relying on translation to make sense of things. Instead, your brain starts recognizing patterns in English, just like native speakers do.
So, how do we start thinking in English? The good news is you don't need to be perfect. The key is to practice small changes in your daily routine.
One simple way is naming objects around you in English. Right now, look around. What do you see? A table, a chair, a window. Try saying those words in English in your mind.
And if you can, describe them. Instead of just table, say, I see a brown wooden table. The more details you add, the more your brain stays in English mode.
Another great exercise is talking to yourself in English. I know it sounds funny, but just try it. Instead of thinking, I need to buy milk, say it in English in your mind, I need to buy some milk.
This is a great habit. If you do this every day, even with simple thoughts, your brain starts switching to English naturally.
So, we know why thinking in English is important, and we've started training our brains. But there's one big problem most learners face: translating in their heads. How can we break this habit?
Great question. Let's talk about that next.
So, we know why thinking in English is important, and we've talked about small exercises to start training your brain. But there's a big challenge many learners face: translating in their heads.
Yes. It's something we do naturally at first. If English isn't your first language, your brain wants to take what you know and translate it word for word. But that actually slows you down.
Right. So, let's talk about how to break this habit and start thinking directly in English.
Before we fix the problem, let's understand why it happens. Our brains are used to working in our native language. When we learn a new language, our first instinct is to connect it to what we already know.
Exactly. It's like a shortcut. Instead of thinking in English, we think in our native language first and then convert it. But that's where mistakes happen.
Right. Different languages have different sentence structures, different word orders, and even different ways of expressing ideas. If you try to translate word for word, sometimes the sentence doesn't make sense in English.
So, how do we stop translating? The first step is to think in simple words. Many learners try to make complicated sentences in their minds and then struggle to translate them. Instead, start with small thoughts.
Yes. For example, instead of thinking, I should go to the supermarket because I need to buy some vegetables, just think, I go to the supermarket. I buy vegetables.
That's a great tip. At first, it might feel too simple, but that's okay. Your brain needs time to adjust. Over time, your sentences will get more complex naturally.
Another technique is learning phrases, not just words. Instead of memorizing single words, focus on full expressions that native speakers use.
Yes. For example, instead of memorizing the word surprised and then trying to build a sentence, just learn the phrase, "That was surprising." When you need it, you won't have to translate, you'll just say it.
Now, what about real conversations? When you're speaking, it's easy to panic and go back to translating in your head.
That's true. One trick is to pause instead of translating. If you don't know how to say something, don't switch back to your native language. Instead, try to explain it using the words you do know.
Exactly. If you don't remember the word for ceiling, you can say the top of the room. If you forget wallet, you can say where I keep my money.
This forces your brain to stay in English mode and helps you think creatively with the words you already know.
So, we've talked about why we translate, how to stop, and how to handle conversations. But there's one more thing that really helps, building your inner voice in English.
Yes. Having an English voice in your mind is a game changer. Let's explore that next. We've talked about why thinking in English is important, and we've learned how to stop translating in our heads. Now, let's take it a step further. Building your inner voice in English.
Yes, this is a powerful technique. Your inner voice is the way you talk to yourself in your mind. If you train this voice to use English instead of your native language, you'll start thinking in English naturally.
That's right. But how do we develop an inner voice in a new language? Let's explore some techniques.
Before we start, let's define what an inner voice actually is. When you think about something, your plans for the day, what you want to eat, or even remembering something funny, your brain speaks in your mind.
Yes. And usually, this happens in your first language. But if you can switch your inner voice to English, you'll start processing information the way native speakers do.
Exactly. This is how children learn their first language. They don't translate, they just think in the language they hear every day.
Okay, so how can you start? The first step is talking to yourself in English, in your mind, of course.
Yes. Throughout the day, try to narrate what you're doing. For example, if you're making coffee, think, I'm boiling water. I'm making coffee. It smells so good.
This may feel strange at first, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Another great technique is asking yourself questions in English. For example, when you're walking outside, think, what's the weather like? And then answer yourself, it's sunny and warm today.
That's a great way to keep your mind active. Another trick is imagining conversations. Pretend you're talking to a friend and think about what you would say.
Yes, you can practice simple things like ordering food. Hi, I'd like a coffee, please. Or even more personal things like talking about your day. Today was a busy day. I had a lot of work.
The goal is to make English your default language for thinking. And one way to do this is by surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
That's right. Listen to music, watch movies, or even change the language on your phone. The more exposure you get, the easier it becomes.
And don't worry about making mistakes. Your inner voice doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be in English.
Exactly. And speaking of that, one thing that helps a lot is starting with simple sentences and building up. Let's talk about that next.
So far, we've talked about why thinking in English is important, how to stop translating in your head, and how to build your inner voice in English. But here's something really important, starting with simple sentences.
Yes. Many learners try to think in long, complex sentences, but that can be frustrating. The best way to start thinking in English is by using basic structures, short, clear sentences that your brain can process quickly.
Exactly. Let's talk about how to do that.
When we speak in our native language, we don't always use long, complicated sentences. Sometimes, we just say things like, I'm hungry, it's cold, or I need coffee.
Yes. And these are the kinds of sentences you should use when you start thinking in English. Instead of overcomplicating things, keep it short and direct.
Right.
If you think, I should go to the supermarket because I need to buy ingredients for dinner, that's already a lot to translate in your head. Instead, just say, I go to the supermarket. I buy food.
The key is simplicity. Once you feel comfortable with short sentences, you can slowly add more details.
A great way to start is by describing what you're doing in the moment. For example, right now, if you're listening to this podcast, think, I listen to a podcast. I learn English.
And if you're drinking coffee, say in your mind, I drink coffee. It tastes good.
Another tip is to use the present tense first. The present is the easiest to think in because it's simple and direct.
Yes. Instead of thinking, I went to the park yesterday and had a great time, just think, I go to the park. It is nice. Later, as you improve, you can add the past tense, I went to the park. It was nice.
The next step is to slowly add more details. Once you're comfortable with a basic sentence, try making it longer.
For example, instead of I eat lunch, you can say, I eat lunch at home. Then later, I eat lunch at home with my family.
Yes.
You're still thinking in English, but now your thoughts are growing naturally without forcing translation.
And this leads us to something really useful, describing your daily routine in English. Let's talk about that next. So, we've covered why thinking in English is essential, how to stop translating in your head, how to build your inner voice in English, and how to use simple sentences to start thinking. Now, let's talk about describing your daily routine in English.
Yes, this is a great way to practice incorporating English into your everyday life. The more you do this, the easier it becomes to think in English naturally.
Exactly. Your daily routine is full of activities that you can describe in simple English. It's a perfect way to get your brain used to thinking in the language.
Describing your routine in English is a natural extension of what we've been talking about. You don't have to think about it much. It's just what you do every day.
Right. Your routine includes activities like eating breakfast, getting ready for work, or even commuting. All of these are great opportunities to practice English.
And the best part is that you already know what you're going to do, so it's easy to stay focused on thinking in English instead of worrying about vocabulary or grammar.
Let's go step by step. The first thing you can do is simply talk about what you're doing right now. For example, if you're listening to this podcast, think, I listen to a podcast. I learn English.
And if you're having breakfast, think, I eat breakfast. I drink coffee. You don't need to make it complicated at first. Start with the basics.
As you get more comfortable, you can start adding more details. For example, instead of just, I drink coffee, you could say, I drink coffee with milk. It is warm.
This is a great way to practice using adjectives and adverbs in English, which will help you think more freely.
Another way to practice is by describing different activities throughout the day. For example, when you're getting ready, think, I take a shower. I brush my teeth. I get dressed.
Or when you're commuting, I drive to work. I listen to music. I see people on the street. The key is to keep it simple and describe your actions as you do them.
And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. The goal is to keep thinking in English without translating. As you practice more, your sentences will naturally get more complex.
One great way to expand your vocabulary is by naming the things around you as part of your routine. For example, you can describe what you're eating. I eat toast. It is crunchy.
Exactly. You can even use your routine to practice different tenses. For example, in the morning you can describe what you are doing, but later in the day, you can describe what you did.
Yes. In the morning, you might think, I get up at 7 a.m. I have breakfast. Then later, you could say, I woke up at 7 a.m. I had breakfast. This helps you practice past and present tenses. all while talking about something you already know.
And if you can add new vocabulary as you go, even better. If you learned the word exercise yesterday, try thinking, I do exercise every morning.
So, by describing your routine, you're practicing vocabulary, sentence structures, and tenses. But there's one more thing we should talk about that can really help reacting to situations in English.
We've covered a lot so far: how to think in English, break the translation habit, build your inner voice, and describe your daily routine. Now, let's talk about reacting to situations in English.
Yes, this is a big one. When you're learning a new language, it's easy to focus on what you want to say. But what about when you need to react to something quickly? Like when someone asks you a question or when something surprising happens.
Great point. The goal is to train your brain to respond naturally in English, without overthinking it. And this takes practice.
Reacting quickly in English helps you sound more fluent. It's one thing to prepare and plan what you're going to say, but it's another to respond in the moment.
Exactly. The more you practice reacting in English, the faster your brain will make the connection. You'll stop thinking in your native language and begin responding directly in English.
And the best part is, you don't need to have perfect grammar or vocabulary to react in English. In fact, most native speakers make mistakes, too. The key is confidence and practicing the natural flow of the language.
So, how can we practice reacting in English? The first step is to start with simple, everyday reactions. For example, when something surprises you, instead of thinking, "Oh my God, that's so surprising," in your native language, just say it in English, "Wow, that's surprising."
Yes. Or when something goes wrong, try thinking in English. Oh no, what happened? Or that's strange. This makes your reactions feel more natural and authentic.
Exactly. You're training your brain to respond in English as you would in your native language. And you don't have to worry about making a mistake. Just go with the flow.
Another great way to practice is by imagining different scenarios in your mind. For example, think about how you would respond if a friend asked you how your day was. Instead of thinking in your native language, try saying something like, "My day was good. I worked and then went for a walk."
Yes. This helps you get used to responding quickly, without overthinking. And you can practice all sorts of situations: ordering food, giving directions, or even reacting to unexpected news.
That's right. You can also practice reacting in different tenses. If someone says, "I lost my keys," you can practice reacting in the past tense. "Oh no, what happened? Did you find them?" Or if someone says, "I'm going to the party tonight," you can practice reacting in the future tense. That sounds fun. Are you excited?
A fun way to practice is by watching TV shows or movies in English. Pause the video and react to what's happening. For example, if someone in a movie gets a surprise, pause the video and think, "What? Really?" Or, "I didn't see that coming."
Yes. You can even pause and imagine what you would say in that situation. It's a great way to practice reacting to different emotions or scenarios. Plus, you'll pick up new vocabulary and expressions you can use in real life.
Another great thing about this is that you get to practice intonation and emotion in your reactions. When someone says something shocking, it's not just the words, it's the way you say them. Reacting with the right tone helps make your speech sound more natural.
So, by practicing different reactions, whether it's surprise, confusion, excitement, or curiosity, you're training your brain to respond naturally in English. And it gets easier with time.
Absolutely. And that brings us to something else that will really help: responding in conversations with short and clear answers. Let's dive into that next. So far, we've covered how to stop translating, how to describe your routine, and how to react in English. Now, let's focus on something very important: the role of vocabulary in thinking in English.
Yes. Vocabulary is absolutely essential for fluent thinking. Without the right words, it's harder to think clearly in English. You might find yourself getting stuck or having to translate, but don't worry, we'll help you build a vocabulary that will support you in thinking naturally.
That's right. The more words you have in your English toolbox, the more you'll be able to think and express yourself without hesitation.
Vocabulary is at the core of thinking in any language. Imagine trying to think in your native language, but you only know a few words. It would be very difficult to express complex ideas or understand anything around you.
Exactly. The same applies to English. If you don't have the right vocabulary, it can slow you down and make thinking in English feel forced or unnatural.
And it's not just about knowing more words, it's about knowing the right words. You want to build a vocabulary that's practical for your everyday life and conversations.
So, how do you build a vocabulary that helps with fluent thinking? The first step is to focus on high-frequency words, the words you use every day in conversation.
Yes, words like eat, go, see, and think are essential. You don't need to memorize complicated words right away. Just focus on the basics, verbs, adjectives, and nouns that you use in your daily routine.
And another important point is to learn word families. Instead of just learning one form of a word, try to learn its variations. For example, you learn the word study, but also learn studying, studied, and student. This will allow you to use the word in different contexts.
That's right. The more you can expand on a word, the more flexible your thinking will be in English.
Another key to building vocabulary is learning words in context. For example, when you learn a word like restaurant, don't just memorize the definition. Learn phrases that are commonly used with it. I'm going to the restaurant. What's on the menu? Or, I like the food at that restaurant.
Yes. By learning phrases and sentences, you're training your brain to use these words in real situations. You'll also remember the word more easily because it's connected to a context.
Absolutely. And when you learn new words, try to use them in sentences right away. This will help you remember them and also make you more comfortable with them in your thinking process.
Another great way to expand your vocabulary is to use it in everyday situations. For example, when you're cooking, think in English about what you're doing. I'm chopping vegetables. I'm boiling water. I'm adding salt.
Exactly. And when you're out and about, try to describe what you see. If you're walking in a park, think, there are trees. The sky is blue. People are walking dogs. This helps you add new words to your vocabulary and practice thinking in English in different contexts.
Yes. Even simple things like describing the weather or what you're wearing can help you practice. The more often you use the words you've learned, the easier it becomes to think in English naturally.
Of course, we can't forget about some tools that can help you expand your vocabulary, like flashcards or language apps. These are great for memorizing words and reviewing them regularly.
That's true. Flashcards can help you practice words in both directions, English to your native language and your native language to English.
You can also make lists of words you've learned and try to use them in different situations. This keeps you engaged with the new vocabulary.
And another great tip is to read regularly in English. Whether it's a book, an article, or even a social media post, reading will expose you to new vocabulary and give you the context you need to understand how words are used.
So, the more you build and use your vocabulary, the easier it will be to think in English without hesitation. But there's one more thing we need to discuss: how to organize your vocabulary to make it even more effective for thinking.
That's right. Let's dive into how we can organize our vocabulary in a way that makes it easier to use in conversation.
So far, we've talked about building a strong vocabulary and how important it is for fluent thinking. Now, let's move on to something fun and really effective: practicing with imaginary conversations.
Yes, this is a powerful technique for improving your ability to think quickly in English. If you want to get faster at responding in English, Simulating dialogues in your mind can really help.
Exactly. When you're practicing imaginary conversations, you're putting your English into action without needing another person to practice with. It's a great way to build confidence and fluency.
The reason imaginary conversations are so helpful is that they allow you to practice real-life situations. Whether you're thinking about a conversation at a restaurant, at work, or with friends, simulating these scenarios can make them easier to handle in real life.
Yes. When you have a situation in mind, you already know what kind of responses you might need. This makes it easier to think of the right words when you're speaking English, because you've already practiced them in your mind.
And the more you do it, the quicker your brain will get at forming responses in English. It's almost like training your mind to be more efficient in real conversations.
So, how do you get started with these imaginary dialogues? First, pick a situation you want to practice. Maybe you're going to the store, meeting a friend, or even having a job interview.
Let's say you're imagining going to a cafe. You can start by thinking about what you might say to the waiter. "I'll have a coffee, please." Or, "Can I get the bill?"
Once you know the basic phrases, try to imagine the other person's responses. You can be creative. For example, the waiter might say, "Would you like anything to eat?" Or, "How is your coffee?" Then you practice responding, "Yes, I'd like a sandwich, please." Or, "It's great, thank you."
Exactly. By practicing both parts of the conversation in your mind, you're building the mental flexibility to think faster in real situations.
The key here is to vary the situations. Don't just stick to one scenario. Practice everything: talking to a friend, asking for directions, discussing your weekend plans, or even ordering food.
That's right. You don't want to only practice easy conversations. Challenge yourself with more complex scenarios, too. For instance, imagine you're discussing a topic at work or explaining a problem to a customer. This will help you improve your ability to think in English when the conversation gets a bit more complicated.
Right, and as you get more comfortable, try to add more details. Instead of just saying, "I want a coffee," imagine adding more specifics. "I'd like a medium-sized latte with almond milk, please."
A great way to make these conversations even more effective is by practicing different tenses. For example, you could practice past, present, and future tenses in your imaginary scenarios.
Exactly. If you're imagining a conversation with a friend about a recent trip, you'd use past tense, "I went to the beach last weekend." Then, you can imagine a conversation about plans for the future. "Next week, I'm going hiking."
This way, you're training your mind to switch between tenses naturally. And it gets easier the more you do it.
Absolutely. And don't just focus on one type of sentence. Include questions and responses to create more natural dialogues.
Another great thing about practicing imaginary conversations is that you can create conversations around real-life scenarios. Think about what's happening in your life right now. Are you planning a trip? Preparing for a meeting?
Yes, exactly. If you're preparing for an important conversation, like a job interview, practice in your mind. Imagine the questions the interviewer might ask, like, "Why do you want to work here?" Or, "What are your strengths and weaknesses?"
And then practice your answers. By doing this, you're mentally preparing yourself for the real situation, which helps reduce anxiety and boosts your confidence.
Now that we've practiced with imaginary conversations and worked on reacting naturally in English, let's talk about a technique that can accelerate your thinking in English. Using English while learning new information.
Yes. One of the best ways to immerse yourself in English is by consuming media and studying using English-only methods. This doesn't mean you need to abandon your native language entirely, but immersing yourself in English will really speed up the process.
Exactly. The more you surround yourself with English, the more natural it becomes to think in English. This technique is a game changer when it comes to making English your default language of thinking.
Think about it. When you're watching a movie or reading a book in your native language, you probably don't translate every sentence in your mind. You understand the content directly, because you're immersed in that language.
The same principle applies to English. The more you consume media in English, whether it's movies, podcasts, books, or articles, the more your brain gets used to thinking directly in English.
Exactly. By exposing yourself to English constantly, your brain starts to connect ideas, vocabulary, and structures more naturally. Over time, you'll begin thinking in English without even realizing it.
Yes, and if you're watching something in English, don't worry if you don't understand every word. The goal is to absorb the language naturally. You can pause the video to check the meaning of new words, but don't get discouraged if you miss something. It's all part of the process.
Another powerful technique is to study using English-only methods. For example, when you're reading a textbook, use the English version instead of the one in your native language. If you're learning new topics, try to find resources, articles, videos, or books that are written or presented in English.
Yes. When you study in English, you start thinking in English more easily. And even if the content is difficult at first, your brain will adjust. You'll pick up words, expressions, and even grammatical structures just by being surrounded by English.
Absolutely. Another great tip is to take notes in English. Even if you're studying a different subject, write your notes, summarize what you learned, and ask yourself questions all in English. This helps your brain associate new information with the English language instead of translating it back to your native language.
In addition to media and textbooks, you can also use English when you're performing daily tasks. For instance, when you're shopping, think about the English words for the items you see. Or when you're cooking, try to use English recipes and follow instructions in English.
That's a great point. The more often you incorporate English into routine activities, the faster you'll get used to thinking in it. Even when you're making a grocery list or planning your day, try to do it in English.
Exactly. This will help your brain get used to English in all contexts, not just in class or during study sessions.
Another fantastic way to consume English content is by listening to English podcasts or audiobooks. Whether you're cooking, cleaning, or exercising, you can easily listen to content in English throughout the day.
Yes. And with podcasts, you can choose topics that interest you, which makes it more enjoyable. Over time, you'll notice your listening comprehension improving, and your brain will become more accustomed to processing information in English.
Audiobooks are also great because they let you hear how words are pronounced while following along with the text. This helps you improve your listening skills, expand your vocabulary, and develop your understanding of sentence structures.
And don't forget the importance of speaking. One of the best ways to think in English is to engage in conversations with others. This doesn't have to be formal or with a teacher. It can be casual chats with friends, language exchange partners, or even speaking to yourself.
Exactly. Practice makes perfect. The more you speak and engage with English speakers, the more natural it will feel to think in English. And just like with media consumption, you don't have to understand every word right away. Keep practicing, and your fluency will improve over time.
So, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've discussed everything from imaginary conversations to consuming media in English. But as you continue to improve, it's important to focus on maintaining progress and avoiding plateaus in your journey to think in English.
Absolutely. It's natural to hit a point where you feel like you've made a lot of progress, but then things start to slow down. You might even feel stuck or like you're not improving as quickly. This is known as a plateau.
The key is to push through that plateau. There are several strategies to help you keep improving and overcome any mental blocks that might come up. Let's dive into those strategies now.
First, it's important to recognize when you're hitting a plateau. You might feel like your English skills aren't improving as quickly as before, or you might find it harder to focus. It's completely normal to experience this.
That's right. Plateaus happen because your brain needs time to process everything you've learned so far. But don't get discouraged. You just need to keep practicing and adjust your approach to get past it.
Mental blocks can also come from fear of making mistakes, lack of motivation, or feeling overwhelmed by the amount of English there is to learn. But once you recognize these blocks, you can take steps to move forward.
One of the first things you can do when you hit a plateau is to set new, clear goals. If you've been working on basic vocabulary, maybe it's time to challenge yourself with more advanced topics.
Exactly. Setting specific, measurable goals helps keep you focused and motivated. For example, you could aim to learn 20 new words each week or challenge yourself to hold a 5-minute conversation in English without switching to your native language.
And make sure your goals are realistic. You don't need to aim for perfection. Instead, focus on gradual improvement.
Another great strategy is to change your practice routine. Sometimes, doing the same exercises or practicing the same way every day can lead to burnout or stagnation.
That's so true. Mix things up. Try different forms of practice, like reading different types of content, newspapers, novels, or technical articles. You can also experiment with different activities, like listening to podcasts, watching movies, or writing daily journals in English.
Yes. Switching things up keeps your brain engaged and helps you stay excited about learning.
Another strategy is to challenge yourself with real-life situations. This might mean having conversations with native speakers, joining a language exchange group, or even traveling to an English-speaking country.
If that's not possible right now, you can start small by speaking to yourself in English throughout the day, like when you're thinking about your plans, describing what's happening around you, or even thinking about your emotions.
Real-life practice is so valuable because it forces you to think on your feet and adapt quickly to the conversation. It'll push you out of your comfort zone, but that's when growth happens.
One of the biggest mental blocks when learning a language is the fear of making mistakes. But the truth is, mistakes are part of the process.
Exactly. The more you embrace mistakes and view them as learning opportunities, the quicker you'll improve. If you're afraid of making errors, try to shift your mindset and see them as part of your journey.
And don't be afraid to ask for feedback from others. Constructive feedback helps you identify areas for improvement and keeps you motivated to keep going.
It's also important to celebrate small wins along the way. This helps you stay motivated and reminded of how far you've come.
Yes.
Maybe you were able to have a conversation for 5 minutes without pausing, or you understood a movie in English without subtitles. These are big accomplishments, and you should feel proud of them.
Remember, progress is progress, no matter how small it seems. Celebrate your victories, no matter how small, because they will keep you motivated and remind you that you're getting better every day.
Consistency is key. Even when you hit a plateau, don't stop practicing. It's better to practice a little bit every day than to do long sessions irregularly.
That's right. You can try setting a small daily goal, like practicing for 20 minutes a day, and stick to it. The more consistent you are, the easier it becomes to push through the difficult times.
Absolutely. And remember, patience is essential. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
So, to sum up, it's all about recognizing when you hit a plateau, setting new goals, changing your routine, challenging yourself, embracing mistakes, and celebrating your small victories.
By using these strategies, you'll be able to maintain progress and continue improving your English without getting discouraged. And remember, there will always be ups and downs, but as long as you keep going, you'll keep getting better.
Exactly. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and most importantly, believe in your progress. You're on the right path, and every step you take is a step closer to thinking and speaking English fluently.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you feel more confident and ready to take your English learning to the next level.
We'll see you next time, and remember, keep thinking in English.